Hello, my name is Paul Wallace. I'm the Africa editor of the Banker magazine, and I'm here with Chris Newson, who's the CEO for Africa at Standard Bank. Chris, thank you very much for joining us. In the last few years, since the onset of the financial crisis, Standard Bank has divested from some major emerging markets like Turkey, like Russia, like Argentina and Brazil, and it's really focused on sub-Saharan Africa. Is that very much the bank's strategy going forward, to focus on that part of the world?
Paul, yeah, I mean, it is the strategy, as you rightly say. I think going back to the time of the crisis, a review of the bank strategy from being effectively desiring a universal bank model in emerging markets internationally and globally to a much more focused strategy on Africa per se. And I think that journey is one which we've come a long way in. So if we reflect as an organisation on where we find ourselves today, I think we've made significant progress in rebalancing, if you like, the capital portfolio of the group. We are, as I think most people are aware, we're still in the process of concluding hopefully some transactions with respect to Standard Bank London, specifically with respect to our international global markets business as a joint venture with ICBC, which in itself will effectively release capital and funding and if you like, give some capacity from the group's perspective to continue to focus on Africa. It's important to note, though, that doesn't mean that we don't have anybody in our international network. However, you will find that those individuals are specifically focused on supporting flows in and out of Africa. Simultaneous with that is obviously a refocus on our network and the asset that we have in Africa and the rest of Africa in that context outside of South Africa. And the key strategy there was, one, to improve our returns that we get out of that network, and the other is to improve its contribution to the group in terms of its materiality, given that outside of that, South Africa is the major engine room of the group. And I think, again, reflecting on December results, for example, you will see that the Rest of Africa franchise is now 25 to 30%, depending on a balance sheet measure or a profitability measure of the group, which reflects on a position of about 12 to 13% some 3 years ago. So great progress been made and very significant growth been seen coming out of that franchise.
You mentioned that the rest of Africa, excluding South Africa, is now sort of 25% of your revenues. Do you have a target for what you would like it to be in, say, 5 years?
We don't have a specific target other than to say that certainly from our perspective, success is defined by a number that gets into the 30% from a group perspective. Clearly, the ability to achieve that is quite dependent on what happens in the rest of the group, which includes obviously the South African environment. But certainly, we would think that the continued growth of that franchise from a contribution perspective of the 20 to 30%, which is what we've seen over the last 3 to 4 years, is something that we would deem achievable and certainly something we continue to strive for going forward.
You recently opened a rep office in Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire, marking your move for the first time into Francophone West Africa. And just what was behind you doing that, and also what's your strategy going forward? Would you like to get a full banking license for Côte d'Ivoire and perhaps some of the other French-speaking countries in the region?
Paul, if you reflect on the Standard Bank Group's representation in sub-Saharan Africa, you very quickly come to the conclusion that the one, if you like, missing piece in our network is Francophone Africa, and the reality of why that might be at the point in time is really a question of other priorities that we've had and the size of markets and the activities that we've been seeing. As you know, particularly in an environment where we've been focused on returns and trying to ensure that the capital that we have at play in the large markets like a Nigeria, like a Kenya, like an Angola, etc., start generating the right level of returns, has been a key focus for us going forward. At the same time, we're very clear that given that is a part of Africa which there is significant economic activity, we think that Côte d'Ivoire gives us the right access point, if you like, to future reference and leverage for the Francophone area, given that it is a key hub for the CFA region, and for us that's the logic behind it. The strategy going forward is really to use that foothold to get a clear understanding of of the levels of activity both in Cote d'Ivoire and across that region. We're putting some advisory capacity and coverage capacity into Cote d'Ivoire to spend time in other countries as well as Cote d'Ivoire. And frankly, as to where we take that is part of the discussion at the moment and part of the thinking. And so we will continue to take a long-term view on the development in that region. I think it's important to note that it's not the fact that you've got a flag, if you like, now in that country does not mean that we haven't done transactions in the Francophone region. We've had risk appetite in many of the countries. We've taken some very large ticket items in countries that we're not represented. So I think the question of representation versus risk appetite is not the same question in that regard.
One of your biggest subsidiaries is Stanbic IBTC, your bank in your Nigerian arm. What's your strategy for that going forward, given that it is now Africa's biggest economy and one that's growing very, very quickly?
Paul, I think the fact that it is, continues to reinforce the view that we made the right call back in 2007, 2008 when we did the merger that we did with IBTC. We continue to think that Nigeria, has tremendous prospects for us. As you will know, over that period since 2008, we've taken a number of looks and continued to review our strategy in Nigeria. We've concluded and continue to conclude that it's an organic model that we wish to build. As you would have seen in the financial results coming out of that business over the last couple of years, including this latest quarter, you can see tremendous momentum starting to build in that. And so, frankly, our strategy in Nigeria remains embedded on an organic model, and we continue to think that as a portfolio between our retail business and our CIB business and our wealth business, we continue to get the right level of growth and returns out of it. So in that respect, nothing changes, and we remain focused on continuing to grow the balance sheet and the returns that we're getting out of that business, which are really pleasing in terms of the progress it's making.
Standard Bank is in the process of setting up a rep office in Ethiopia, which is one of the few markets in Africa that is actually closed to foreign banks, at least in terms of full banking licenses. Just how sort of close are you to opening a rep office there? And also, does this signal that Ethiopia is going to open up in the near future to foreign banks?
The answer to your first question is we're very close. It's really a question of a couple of process-related sign-offs that are required. In essence, we already have the people, we already have a number of the relationships. There are people that are spending a significant amount of time in Ethiopia. To your point, the fact is it is a rep office. Currently the legislation and the regulations don't allow us to go any further than that from a foreign bank perspective. It would be speculative to say, is it a precursor to an opening up of the financial markets? Clearly, we have taken the view that we want to be present in that country, because at that point you will be best placed to take to the next level in terms of should it open up. But there's tremendous activity going on within Ethiopia and cross-border from the East Africa region, and so we're very keen to make sure that we've got the right level of foothold. And frankly, as to how quickly that market opens up to us to then take it to the next level is a matter for all of us to kind of watch and wait and see. But I think the trick for us is making sure we're building those relationships, we're building the network, we've got the corporate relationships, and we're facilitating a lot of the cross-border flow and using balance sheets outside of the group to effectively facilitate that.
Chris, thanks very much for your time today.